brought to a breakthrough. In 1980, he created an equation of his own, one that combined all of the Julius sets into a single image. When Mandelbrot iterated his equation, he got his own set of numbers. Graphed on a computer, it was a kind of roadmap of all the Julius sets, and quickly became famous as the emblem of fractal geometry. The Mandelbrot set.
It's not easy to describe the Mandelbrot set visually. It looks like a man, it looks like a cat, it looks like a cactus, it looks like a cockroach. It's got little bits and pieces that remind us of almost anything that you can see out in the real world, particularly living things. So it has a character that reminds us of a lot of things, and yet it itself is unique and new.
The Mandelbrot set is real, an absolute thing, no question whatsoever. Any mathematician or any computer scientist or student in a school can study it and find the same, describe the same thing. It's a common experience. And so such things that can be magnified forever and have infinite precision do exist, but they're not touchable.
It's a geometrical shape, an icon, if you wish, which somehow embodies as an example a very important aspect of how the world works. Somebody recently actually called this set the thumbprint of God.
With this mysterious image, Mandelbrot was issuing a bold challenge to long-standing ideas about the limits of mathematics.
The blinders came off, and people could see forms that were always there, but formerly were invisible.
The Mandelbrot set was a great example of what you could do in fractal geometry, just as the archetypical example of classical geometry is the circle.
When you zoom in, you see them coming up again, so you see self-similarity. You see, by zooming in, you zoom, you're zooming in, you're zooming in, and pop. Suddenly, it seems like you're exactly where you were before, but you're not. It's just that way down there, it has the same kind of structure as way up here, and the sameness can be grokked.
Now we'll begin our serious exploration of the Mandelbrot set. A voyage which, in fact, could last forever and ever, much longer than the lifetime of the universe. I have here the full set, about 6 inches across. Now, if I blow this up, I'll increase the magnification now 13 times, and you see more and more detail is appearing. And the interesting thing is you see mini Mandelbrots, replicas, almost identical, yet perhaps subtly different, of the original set. And I can go on doing this. Here's a magnification of more than 3,000 times. So the original picture, about 6 inches across, is now half a mile across. And no matter how much we magnified it, a million times, a billion times, until the original set was bigger than the entire universe, we would still see new patterns, new images emerging, because the frontier, the M set, is infinitely complex. And when I say infinitely, I really mean that. Most people, when they say infinitely, they mean only rather big. But this is really infinity. is so remarkable, in fact, astounding, about the Mandelbrot set is that although it's infinitely complex, it's based on incredibly simple principles, unlike almost everything in modern mathematics. In fact, anybody who can add and multiply can understand the principles on which it's based. You don't even have to subtract or divide, still less use logarithms or trigonometrical functions to comprehend how the Mandelbrot set is created. In fact, in principle, it could have been discovered any time in human history and not merely in 1980. But the problem is this: although it's only based on adding and multiplying, you have to carry out those operations millions, billions of times to create a complete set. And that's why it was not discovered until the era of modern computers.
Shalom, shalom, family. As always, at the 10-minute mark, we're going to say the Lord's Prayer. So bow with me as we say the Lord's Prayer before we start. Our Father in heaven, honored be thy name. May thy kingdom come. May thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us each day our daily bread, and forgive us of our trespasses as forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us on the righteous path and guard us from the evil one. In your name we pray. Amen. Shalom, 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 family. As always, peace and love. We come in the name of truth. We come in the name of peace and truth and love. So there's been some very interesting conclusions, as I do believe in looking at all things unbiasedly, as I do believe truth will lead us to the right thing. I'm going to actually open up something, and this is going to be the major reason why we're looking at this. I'm going to open up something else too. There's two reasons why we're going to be looking at a haplogroup called T. Usually when we think about Jews, some people just say they're J or the E lineage or things like that. But there is this haplogroup called haplogroup T that certain geneticists like Dr. Nathan, he himself actually says that particularly T is actually the Jews. That's what on one of his videos that he put out that he didn't put on YouTube or anything. It was like a back, what's the word I'm looking for? It was a webinar he did that I got into and I got to see. And he's writing a book and he's concluding that haplogroup T is actually Israel. But what we're going to do today is we're going to look at haplogroup T and we're going to find out who it is. In fact, haplogroup T is very interesting because this is one of the ones that when we was looking at the children, if you don't know already, the children of São Tomé and Príncipe, they found their genetics and they concluded that the Jews haplogroup was not amongst them. Now, the reason why they said that was because, let me just turn it down a little bit so it's not too loud, was because T and J wasn't among them. That's actually what it says right here. I'm just going to go down if you've ever seen this. This was the finding of the Jews, of the descendants of São Tomé and Príncipe. Right, we had looked at their genetics a little bit, and we seen they had E1B1A, they had some E1B1Bs there, they had some R1B1A, they had all those mixed there and everything, and we broke down. Also, we can see the female lineages, the L lineages are there, but they did have an interesting comment saying J and T were not detected in either of those groups. Now, that's important because we already talked about J and T a little bit, but now we're going to go a little more deeper into its origins and where it came from. So I just want to show you that the reason why is because the potential of it being Israelite. So let's look at it unbiasedly as we do with all things. Look at it carefully and unbiasedly. So let's look at it at a family tree. Let's look at it at a whole family tree. Now remember, under CT, you're going to have a split of two lineages. You're going to have a split of CF and DE. DE is going to be what we believe to be Shemites, and CF is what we believe to be Japhanites. It's just a truth. Now, what anyone would believe if they believe J or T to be Israelis, they had to think that under CF, you'll have to have some Shemites under CF. And we have to go all the way down right here where T is, where under LT, you're going to have a split of L and T. And T supposedly is the one that says it's going to be Israeli. But that's what we're going to look at today. And we're going to break down what actually it is. So the T haplo tree is a very interesting tree. It's actually one of the most spreaded out haplogroups. It's spread out across the globe. But we can look at ancient genetics to find out who they are today. Now, here's just a little bit. So T haplogroup, we just talked about, is one of the most widely diverse, basically Y DNA, right? The parental lineages in the world, right? In Europe, it makes up only 1% of the population, right? That's what's very interesting about T. T, even just to consider it being, obviously, the Israeli line is so spread out, but it's because we got to look at what happened. And we're going to look at the whole thing. We're going to find out what happened and how they got to certain areas, such as Africa and things like that. Because T actually went down into Africa, and it settled and became a major part of what is called the Berber groups. But we're going to look at that as we get there. So I'm just going to show a little bit of information here real fast. So I'm going to not play the sound, but this is a summary from Haplogroup T. It's just showing you basically a little bit here. I'm not going to go over this. I just got some. This link is going to be in the description. If I didn't put it in the description, I'm going to put it in the description. And you can just see we're just going to be going off this note right here. So it just got some extra information on different things, on different groups and everything. But I want to talk about a very interesting claim. Now, what's interesting is that there was an event that happened with Sheba. Now, if you know about the event with Sheba and Solomon, there's an event that people say that basically Sheba had a baby with Solomon. You probably heard that before. And what is also supposed is that line ruled in Ethiopia, and supposedly they took the ark with them. Now, if you ever looked into that, you'll find out some very interesting things. So that's what we're going to look at today. Yet the ark is mentioned all the way till the time of Josiah. Now, this is actually important to understand because the claim is that the Ethiopians took the ark with them. But in the time of Josiah, even in the part of Chronicles 35 and 3, we know the ark is mentioned. The ark is mentioned with Josiah. So we got to look at this thing very carefully. And that's what we're going to do. I'm going to go to 11 or 157 right here. And we're going to look at this very carefully. I'm just going to turn this thing down because that was very loud. I'm just making sure I listen to the sound at the same time. I'm going to go to a part here and we're going to talk about this.
According to 1 Kings chapter 10, a certain queen of Sheba came to visit Solomon because she had heard of his great wisdom. In the biblical account, they talked for a long time, exchanged some expensive gifts, and then she simply returned home. However, according to Ethiopian tradition, that's not all that happened. In the Kebra Nagast, which is Ethiopia's national origin story, the queen of Sheba was named Makeda, and she and Solomon had relations. When she returned home, she gave birth to a son named Menelik, who went on to become the first king of Ethiopia.
Now, what we're going to do, we're going to look at this very closely, and this is where it's going to get very important because there's certain tribes and certain names that we want to look at. And those certain tribes and names, I'm going to click this, and we're going to talk about this because it has to do with the Ark of the Covenant. So I'm going to go down a little bit, and we're going to talk about this. What's important to understand, after close examination, many people have already concluded that in Ethiopia, they do not have the Ark of the Covenant. They made a lot of claims. We know about the claims about them saying that they had the Ark of the Covenant and everything. But if you look at what they have, it's definitely not the Ark of the Covenant. It's just not. When they had seen the Ark of the Covenant and everything, right, you know the story, right? There's a long-standing religious legend in Ethiopia that describes how the Ark of the Covenant was brought to Ethiopia 3,000 years ago. And from this person right here, right, that one son that we just seen. And then they say that they stayed there for a while. Now, the reason why we're looking at this, I'm going to show you why we're looking at this, is because the T haplogroup is actually going to be one of the groups that's going to be connected with this. In fact, let me read a little bit something here. Over 50% of haplogroup T has been reported in some tribes in northern Somalia. And you see this name right here. This one, I'm not going to try to pronounce it, the T, something like that. We're going to look at these groups because these certain groups are going to have connections to the ties of what happened in Ethiopia.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mr. This is Africa, and here is Djibouti. Now, let's get going, shall we? It was back in Neolithic times that the first person set foot in what would one day be known as Djibouti, arriving either from here or here. These people followed the trend of those stony days in making art on rocks and storing foodstuffs in ceramics. They were nomads, cattle herders, who moved from place to place. Djibouti is considered to be a part of the ancient kingdom known as Punt to the Egyptians, and the two engaged in trade, the Egyptians very much desiring Puntite gold, ivory, ebony, cinnamon, and animal skins. Situated as it was to the east, the land of the sunrise, Punt was a romantic, mythical place to the Egyptian imagination, and they called it the land of the god, meaning the sun god Ra. Aside from Egyptian mural-etched mentionings, however, Punt remains very much a mystery, and it was lost to the mists of time. Now, since Arabia is only a camel throw away, Djibouti became one of the first places to accept Islam after its inception in the 7th century. The people then, as now, were mainly of two ethnic groups, Somali and Afar. They are closely related, so I guess you could call them near and afar. Djibouti became part of the Ifat Sultanate, which developed the habit of attacking Christian Ethiopia, until Ethiopia grew fed up and defeated them in battle. The Adal Sultanate succeeded it, and when their leaders weren't squabbling and toppling each other, they were fighting the expanding Ethiopia, having the most success under Ahmad Ibrahim al-Ghazi. Djibouti then fell to the Ottoman Empire, being part of their province of Egypt, and you don't hear much about it till the French arrived and took control in the latter 19th century, calling it French Somaliland. France was in charge until 1977, when Djibouti voted for independence, and this gentleman became first president, under whose rule the country did very poorly, many blaming the widespread addiction to this drug here, which the people chew, rendering them not exactly the most productive of citizens. The Civil War didn't help either. IOG here became president in 1999, and despite being a dictator who has not done much for the country, possesses the curious ability of always being re-elected. I'm sure jailing his opposition has nothing to do with his string of victories. In 2005, he was the only candidate on the ballot. Long gone are the days when Djibouti was Egypt's notion of paradise. This country is among the world's poorest, with a low human development index rank, but it is...
Now, also keep in mind, you see how the people look. Now, I always talk about this. Pigmentation doesn't give us a representation of a haplogroup. Remember that. But pigmentation is actually a diverse thing that we see on different haplotypes. So they're going to actually, a lot of them have haplogroup T. A lot of them have haplogroup T, though they had a different type of pigmentation, but we're going to look at them a little more closer here.
Only overseas military bases are also in Djibouti. But what does the future hold for this nation? Comment below, but for now, bye-bye!
I'm going to close this. Now go to this one right here. A little more understanding. A little more understanding on why we're looking at these ones of Somalia and how you say that, the Djibouti, or how you say that, right? So these two groups, they're going to have haplogroup T. That's very important. It talks about them having that group, and we're going to look at it very closely because these are the groups we want to look at specifically, directly, because they're going to tell us the story behind what I'm going to show you real fast right here. Just to give a quick summary, what we're looking at here is how they have potential of possibly being Israel, but once you see the full picture, you're going to understand exactly who they are when we trace them to their root, directly to who they are and everything. So it's very, very interesting when looking at those things. But let's see a little bit more history before we start diving in. Now, this is just going to show us their placement. I'm going to skip a little ahead on this one. I'm going to make it go fast. And the reason why is because I just want to get to a certain time frame. In fact, I'm gonna leave this right here because I'm gonna need this again, but I'm gonna leave that right there. So I'm gonna go down a little bit. And first, before we talk about this, let's talk about this split real fast because this split is kind of important. I and J makes the lineages of J and I. Those are going to be different than T. Those are also going to be different than E. E is over here, but T actually breaks from K, and you're going to have a split. You're going to have your P's and your R's and stuff like that. But from K, you get your T. And you're going to have a very certain line that actually went and settled high up north. And we're going to note where they are, and we're going to note who comes from there, because it's also very important to see where they come from and everything. Another hot spot, we're going to talk about this real fast. I'm going to go down a little bit, and I'm going to click this one because we're going to need the other one real fast. But first, I want to jump right to a certain spot on this one and show you something. So right here, you see where it says, I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, and the curtains of the land of Median did tremble. Now, it's because the mixing that had happened in this area, a lot of the Medianites and certain tribes started merging together. And what you're going to see here, we're going to soon talk about how this group that we're going to talk about now, where we're going to get the history now. I'm going to just turn this on and pause it. I'm going to pause this, and now we're going to get the deep history on it, and we're going to look at the maps. The reason why I'm showing you this is because they have connections with the E groups. I'm going to go down a little bit. I'm going to read you a quote when they start to come down from the area, because where they actually come from is from the north, and I'm going to show you that in ancient times. So right here, we're going to look at this T group where it says H and T. It just lets us know right here about the early Natufian and everything. It just lets us know about how the E group right here, it says these are to date the oldest known E1B1B individuals. The same haplogroups show up in pre-pottery Neolithic B, Jordan. That's where we find the E1B1A in Israel, accompanied by new haplogroups. So the first time they come down, new haplogroups H2 and T. So let's get a little understanding of T real fast. I'm going to open something, and we're going to look where T is in ancient times first. We're going to verify where is T in ancient times. Now, why is that important? Because if they were Israel, guess where we'll find them? We'll find them either in the land of the Levant in Israel, or we would find them in Africa when they were sent into captivity, right? Joseph went down there. We got all the tribes that were down there, right? Right at the tip where Egypt is. Because remember the saying, the scripture says in Amos, I have called Israel, right? He called them from basically Africa, right? Called them from the south, from Egypt. Click right here. But this T group, what's interesting about this T group is that the T group is actually found in the north, and not just in the north. It's actually found very high up north. Make sure I didn't click the wrong one. Okay, right here. I'm going to go over a little bit to this one. Actually, matter of fact, it's not this one. It's going to be one more over, not the late right here. This is the one I wanted to click. All right, so now we're going to see where is haplogroup T in this ancient time, in this ancient time, right? You see this yellow right here? This yellow is actually the origins for haplogroup T. You see this yellow right here? Let's zoom in a little bit and let's see what we see there. And we're going to note what group comes from here. Long story short, it's going to be the Vandals. But you can see right here, this is going to be that group. We're going to take a note of this group later on coming downwards. And they're going to be, remember, E lineage came upwards and then brought them down a little bit later. We can also note that in another time frame with the E lineage, right? You can see the E lineage somewhere over here, right here. See the E lineage got over here, but some reason they actually end up getting over here, the E lineage, and bringing some of the T down with them, and the H. H and T end up being connected with the E1B1B group. When they came up there, you can see right here, they end up reaching later over here and later in time. And we can follow that throughout time, right? We can go to another time frame and take a look. But rather, this is what I want you to see. I want you to see the story behind what happened with Ethiopia and these tribes, these certain tribes and everything.
Ethiopia, home to more than 100 million people, the original home of the coffee bean, seat of the African Union, and a nation whose roots stretch back into ancient times. Ethiopia has been heavily settled, going far back into prehistory. Da'amet is the earliest known kingdom in this region, and was a contemporary of ancient Egypt and Nubia to the north. On the opposite side of the Red Sea, facing Da'amet, was the kingdom of Saba in modern-day Yemen. These kingdoms appear to have had close ties, and some even theorize that they may have formed a single kingdom. According to Ethiopian tradition, this was the home of the legendary Queen of Sheba. She converted to the faith of Solomon of Israel and bore his child, who returned to Ethiopia to rule as king, beginning a long line of Ethiopian kings who claim direct descent from King Solomon. The Ethiopian church today maintains the Ark of the Covenant was brought to this ancient kingdom during this period.
So what's important about this claim about the Ark of the Covenant, that's what we had to look deep into. Obviously, taking a deep look into it and everything, it's not a secret that the Ark of the Covenant is not inside the Ethiopian church, because the Ark of the Covenant looks nothing like what they have there. Also, we know that the Ark of the Covenant was mentioned being past the time of Solomon's time. During the time of Solomon, they claim that during the time of Solomon, that's when they got the ark. We know that's not true because it's recorded that the ark was with Josiah all the way to the later times. We even got later writings that supposedly say Jeremiah was the one that actually hid the ark, actually moved the ark to somewhere else, and no one knows where it is but Jeremiah. But that's in later sources. But we do know that the Ark of the Covenant was mentioned in the time with Josiah. That's very important. Not just that, but we're going to go a little more deeper into it.
And is being kept safely there under guard for more than 2,500 years. For unknown reasons, Da'amat gradually eroded into several city-states and successor kingdoms around 400 BC. One of these, Aksum, would evolve into the first well-documented great power to rise in Ethiopia, and was able to unite the northern Ethiopian highlands beginning around the 1st century BC, where they established bases on the Ethiopian plateau and from there expanded. By the 1st century AD, they became a major player on the commercial route between the Roman Empire and ancient India. A notable Persian religious figure and scholar of the time regarded Aksum as one of the 4 great powers of his day, alongside Persia, Rome, and China. To facilitate this booming trade, the Aksumite kings minted large amounts of gold currency that became widely used and have been found throughout the Mediterranean to India. Around 325 AD, the king Ezana converted to Christianity, making it the state religion, and was also the first state to ever use the image of the cross on its coins. Ezana campaigned against the kingdom of Kush to the north, as far as the borders of the Roman province of Egypt, and is believed and carried
However, this sack had been relatively mild. The Vandals, who had lived in what is modern Poland since at least the 2nd century BC, came into contact with Rome.
I'm glad you told me that. I'm sorry, my bad, my sound went out. Okay, so the reason why I was showing you this, because you see this group right here, you see this T right over here. I'm gonna zoom in a little bit. You see this T right in here in the yellow, right here. Keep in mind this group, we're gonna see it again, it's gonna go into Africa, right? They started off up here and they're gonna make their way into Africa. The word barbarian, and the reason why I wanted to show you that is because the word barbarian, right? The term barbarian is a variation of the Greek word barbaros or barbarian, which had earlier in history been applied by the Romans specifically to their southern hostile neighbors, right? From Germania and the Celts, you know, like Iberians and Gauls and stuff like that, Goths, Vandals as well. That's why we're gonna look at the Vandals, because the Vandals actually have Haplogroup T. And that's what we're gonna look at today and where they started off. They started off in the north, but they came down into the south, into Africa. And we can follow their genetics the whole time. So that's what we're gonna be looking at today, right here. The Vandals actually were up here, and now we're gonna see the history.
Around 170 AD, the 10th year of Emperor Marcus Aurelius's reign. For 5 years, the emperor had been waging a ruthless war on the Middle Danube against his Marcomanni and Quadi foes. Earlier in the 2nd century, Marcus's predecessor, Trajan, conquered and annexed much of the Dacian kingdom of Decebalus. Acquiring its vast gold reserves was a great boon to the empire's economy, but Dacia beyond the Danube hid great dangers. Also speaks of how southern Gaul, especially the regions of Lugdunensis and Narbonensis, were, with the exception of a few cities, one universal scene of desolation. Yet this was not the work of the Vandals, who were at that point only in the north. Instead, such devastation in these regions was almost definitely caused by the bitter civil war being raged there. It was this pandemonium which would provide the impetus for the next stage of Vandal migration, this time to the south. When Constantine's revolt began to collapse in 409, multiple approaching imperial contenders duked it out for the throne, and a new round of fighting began. In the midst of such unrest, the Vandals walked into Aquitania and towards the Pyrenees, essentially unopposed. The Vandals crossed the Pyrenees into Hispania during autumn 409, at the invitation of a former commander under Constantine III named Gerontius, who had rebelled against his usurper emperor and required allies. The Vandals were perfect candidates, and were probably offered land for service in the relatively safe silver-rich province. The 2 years and prosperity, the Visigoths also crossed the Pyrenees, occupying the formerly imperial province of Tarraconensis as victory of the Western Roman Empire. It was both the first great Vandal victory and the moment their power began to truly ramp up. In the aftermath, Castinus' defeated Roman soldiers.
So can you tell when you're looking at the Vandals and a lot of the barbarian tribes, they were really going at it with the Romans and really making their way down? You see how they settled right here a little bit, and now they're going to make their way lower.
Past Baeticus' fertile fields to the sea, raiding the rich Balearic Islands and Mauritania. Then, between 427 and 429, 2 events took place which gave the Vandals the impetus to take their final leap to Carthage. In the year 428, Gunderic died and was succeeded by his prodigious brother Gaiseric, who was elected king by the Vandal elite. In Africa itself, the Comes Africae, Boniface, was a rising star, but this unnerved Western Magister Militums, Aetius and Constantius Felix, who sought to quell this internal threat. Imperial plots and schemes led to Boniface rebelling against central authority and...
So I'm going to pause it right there. So I just want to show you the movements of the Vandals from where they started, right? From where we find the genetics and everything, and from where they started. And then we're going to note they're going to make their way down here. Here's a little bit more. You can see a little more history right here. Matter of fact, let's open it on YouTube here. So the reason why I wanted you to see up to here, because this is up to the 400s, right? I'm gonna see there's one with a timestamp, so you can see that real fast right here.
Were actually empowered by it. In 420.
So about this time, so about the 400 ADs, the reason why I want you to see that, because now we're going to look at them where they were stationed. And the reason why that's important is because we're going to note what happens with them. We're going to note how they end up basically taking Africa and actually causing some damage in a way. But they're also noted as being merging with many groups. In fact, many different groups have T in it, but T is so spread out. But once you know who they are, it's not hard to understand why it's like that. So here's a little bit on where they settled. Just gonna turn the sound off. We don't need a sound on this one. So right here, 435, right? AD and everything. Just talk about the Germanic Vandals. You can see where they settled and everything, taking some of these lands and everything. Just getting the idea where they were, right? Getting an idea of their location, because we're going to look at this. And this is what I was talking about when I was saying about E1B1B being with the Berber tribes. T is the Berber tribes. T is the Berber tribes, not just T, but remember, Berber means, you know, basically a mixed company. And long story short, here's a kingdom of the Vandals and the Alans. So the Alans and the Vandals and everything being settled in these areas. Right, you can just see basically some of the places where they were settled and everything right there, and then it fell, and then that would cause, you know, them to mix in with different groups. But let's go over here now. Now let's take a look at this. So let's talk about some quick genetic information. So right here is going to be from a genetic site right here. So I'm just going to show you that this is an actual site. It just talks about the ancient genomes in North Africa and evidence of these things and whatnot. Watch what it says here. Just talk about some of the female DNA and the male DNA, right? It talks about they were attained and from Moroccan early Neolithic, right? And Moroccan late Neolithic. It says suggests, watch what it says here, suggests either a population replacement or an important genetic influx into Morocco between, it says between a long time ago, pretty much 5,000, 3,000 BC, right? Samples, it just lets us know the group that came there. Now, the reason why I want to show you this is because if we look at what it says here, where it talks about here regarding basically the Y DNA, the parental lineage, it says basically individuals carry Y chromosomes, right? Distinctly related to typical North African EM81. Now, we already talked about that EM81. That's the Arabic lineage, right? We already talked about that last time. We talked about E1B1A versus E1B1B. And we talked about how EM81 is going to be that African lineage that is going to be the Arabs. That one is in connection. When we look at the Arabs, it let us know that the E lineage, the E1B1B, was the Arabs. We already looked at that on another piece of paper. And then right here it says, while the Y chromosome of KEB belongs to, right? KBB is just lets us know a later group came in, a later group. And then it just lets us know that that later group, right, belongs to haplogroups K. Remember, T comes from K. Remember that. T comes from K and all that whatnot. It just lets us know that that group itself is that group. My bad. It's right here. Right here, T. These groups, this is actually going to be your, I knew that as soon as I saw that X, I was like, no, this is mtDNA. Right here, you see this T, this TM184 haplogroup, that's the Berber. That's the one we was just looking at. That's the one that was up there in the north, right? That group right here, that's up here in the north, end up basically taken some places of Spain, and then it came down and made its way into Africa. Now, it's also important to know that they make multiple migrations to different areas. That's why we read that when E1B1B came down, T groups came down, and H also came down. Go back over here. So you can see right here, the T group came there and everything. It just lets us know a little bit about that group and everything and whatnot. Now let's go down. I'm going to show you something now. I'm going to go down real fast, and I'm going to show you this. Now I'm going to show you this on 2 points here. I'm going to open this. 2044. So over here, right here. So now we're going to get a little more detailed picture on what was going on and some things. So I'm going to show you 2 points. First, this one.
Hundreds, groups or tribes of Germanic people started to migrate. Augustine's own city of Hippo was under siege by the Vandals and would fall to them shortly after Augustine's death. In the late 300s, groups or tribes of Germanic people started to migrate from their ancestral lands in other parts of Europe and eventually into the Roman Empire. We won't get into all of the reasons. If you want to learn more, you can always check in with the History of Germany podcast by Travis Dow, and he'll fill you in on the details. Right now, though, all we need to know is that these Germans were on the move. These Germanic tribes were not nomadic, as Travis mentioned during our crossover episode, Sidetrack episode 28, for your reference. Visigoths, Ostrogoths, Vandals, Franks, and even Alans, who weren't technically Germanic, but whatever, all came and entered the empire during this period. The shocking thing is how quickly everything started to fall apart for the Roman Empire. At the time of the Council of Constantinople in 381, the empire was in a pretty stable position.
So the reason why I'm showing you this, because we talked about this last time about the movement of the barbaric peoples and why was that important, because that is also the influence of why they say J or T is going to be Israeli. But when you follow their origin, the origin story is actually very important to understand. The Vandals, there's no doubt where they were settled at, right? And that's why we were looking at this when we were zoomed in there. I'm going to go right here so you can see this is what we're talking about here, this group right over here that also went into Africa, which we found them also in Africa and everything. You can see them right here, this group. They also made some trips downwards. So we're going to also note this group here. I'm going to go over here, right? So you see this? I'm going to go to another timestamp right over here. So this is just some, some pictures, some growth and everything. But I'm going to go to 828 or 20 right here.
So now enters the Arabs, the armies of Islam. The Arabs seem to have just about come out of nowhere at the perfect time in history. They had a system or a cultural organization that was perfectly adapted to exploit the weaknesses that surrounded them. Throughout the 600s AD, the Arabs spread through Egypt and into western Libya.
Now remember, we already talked about this in the E1B1B video. If you haven't seen that spot, we had talked about the Vandals and the Arabs. And we know the Arabs is E1B1B. We already got a full solid information of E1B1B is the Arabs. The large group here was the E1B1B. And then right over here, who merged together? The group that merged together was the Vandals, and the Vandals were the Berber tribe and the Arabs.
As they progressed, the Arabs would set up bases they could use to support further operations. When they conquered more, they set up more bases to support more conquests. By 709 AD, all of North Africa, from the Sinai to Tingis in the west, was all completely under the control of the Arabs. That is a stretch of territory nearly 2,500 miles long, conquered in less than 60 years.
So we talked about that before. I just wanted to show that because we had some individuals have questions on who was the Berbers. They would say, oh, E1B1B was the Berbers. E1B1B was not necessarily who is described as the Berbers, but rather is actually important to understand that just to see that timestamp right here, we had talked about this before. I'm going to go to this video and a timestamp. I'm going to leave this one right here, and I'm going to go to a timestamp on this right here, and I'm going to talk about something on how we know. 2:30 right here. But also I'm going to go to that video that we just did. I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to go to that video we just did, because there's a point there that some didn't understand when we're talking about the Berbers and everything right here. And it's at 44. So right here, we had talked about the Berbers.
The Arabs and the Berbers were connected. And that's what we also know, that they actually noted that in genetics, right? Remember, we had looked at that where it says right here, in close affiliations with the Berber groups. Berber means barbarian. Berber is just short for barbarian. Barbarian groups, those are most likely like Vandals and stuff like that that came down there and settled with them and mixed in. You'll have T group.
So remember EM81. So that's why we was talking about EM81 also being with the Berber groups when they went up into what you call Spain, right? And those are going to be the Arabs that were basically mixed with the Vandals, which will be what they call the Berber or barbarian groups. Go back over here. Now, the reason why I want to show you that is because I want to show you a little bit of this history now. I want to show you the history on what happened there.
Berbers were divided into many diverse tribes, whose cultures. This region is incredibly inhospitable, save for the most densely populated portion along the fertile Mediterranean and Atlantic coastlines, known as the Maghreb. Never a single people, the Berbers were divided into many diverse tribes, whose cultures, dialects, and social structures, although closely related to one another, differ from region to region. The title Berber is an exonym coming from the ancient Greek barbaroi, sharing the same root from which the word barbarian is derived. While Berber is still the most common nomenclature in the West, the Berbers refer to themselves with a variety of names in their native Afro-Asiatic languages, chief among them the Amazigh, a title which typically translates to the free people. We will use both names throughout this video. Over thousands of years.
Now, also keep in mind that the Berber groups mixed in, as you know, like it says, not a single group. It's not like you're going to find just a T group, just clean T and then a clean this and that. They're mingled. They're mingled together. Just keep that in mind. But the group that we want to note there, which one is the one that would be considered as the one that came down there, those would be the Vandals. But also here's a little more on it. 1040 right here.
Was defeated at the Battle of Tabaka, and with her death, the lands of the Berbers were quickly conquered, becoming the Umayyad province Ifriqiya, from the word Africa.
This right here just talks about how the Arabs swept through, right? They met with the Berber, the Vandal tribes that was down there, and then they basically, when they went at it with them, they basically, defeated them. And then that's when they started to work together to finally enter this last plot. And we're going to talk about that too, that last piece that happened. And the name, we also can note the name of the leader of the Berber that led the Arabs and everything.
Nascent Umayyad Caliphate near the town of Meskiana in 698. Nevertheless, she was defeated at the Battle of Tabaka, and with her death, the lands of the Berbers were quickly conquered, becoming the Umayyad province Ifriqiya, from the word Africa that the Romans used for the same region. Ironically, the tribal warrior lifestyle that made the Amazigh such fierce foes also allowed them to integrate seamlessly into the new Muslim world. Berbers converted to Islam en masse, but for the most part, this conversion was nominal at best, and despite professing a new faith, the Amazigh retained many attributes of their languages, social structure, and many traditional practices. The Muslim force that crossed the narrow sea and famously conquered Visigothic Iberia in 711 was predominantly Amazigh in origin. In fact, one of its principal commanders, Tariq ibn Ziyad, was of Berber extraction. His name lives on in the modern-day city of Gibraltar, whose name is a corruption of the Arabic word Jabal Tariq, meaning Mountain of Tariq. It was also during this century that the Trans-Saharan trade network began expanding, linking the Arabic world to sub-Saharan Africa, which subsequently introduced the Muslim faith to many communities in West and Central Africa, such as the powerful Empire of Ghana. Despite all...
So you see how they're starting to mix and mingle there, just to get a little idea on why today, looking at genetics, why it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It can be kind of difficult, but it's not too difficult once we can know who's everyone and whatnot. Here's a little quote from Nature. She's going to show you where this quote's coming from right here. Just talking about tea and everything in the Arab population. You can see right here, right? Because they end up mixing in because of the faith. The faith end up got them to work together, right? You can see right here, just talks about a group there where it talks about lineages ascribed to be basically, you see that word autochthonous, basically meaning native, right? Not by moving or anything like that, but actually they're going to be native Berber origin, right? 71%, a little bit talking about that right here. And it's just talking about basically what group they are as T, right? Evidence was clear on the ancient introduction of T lineages into the region, right? Probably since what we looked at, remember we looked at that Neolithic, the Neolithic time frame. That's what we was looking at right here. It's the Neolithic right here, Neolithic time. So we see T up here in the Neolithic time, but T also came down here, right? You don't see it right here, but you know that T came down there because we have evidence of T coming down from this area and then settling in Africa earlier. And that's why when the Berbers came down, they were basically making a migration to a place they knew. They were making a migration to a place they actually knew before. So they already had connections down here and connections up here. That's important to understand. That's where the T was actually stationed. It's actually stationed upwards and downwards. So that's why they mixed and mingled with the Arab groups. The reason why that's important is because the T group mixing with the Arab groups leaves a mystery, right? It leaves a mystery, right? Is it T? Are the Arabs T? Are the Arabs E? We know the Arabs are E because those are groups that we know that went into that area. We know for a fact because the E is the large lineage that's described as being the Arab lineage. Even the original Arabs of the rising of the caliphates, that was E1, B1B in Arabia that was dominant there. So the reason why there's a mix-up, I just put a little extra video here. The reason why there's a mix-up, not going to show it or anything like that, but this just talks about what happened in that land. It's pretty complex. If you want to know why it's so complex, this just basically tells the story of it all. This is just a little summary here. I'm not going to play the whole thing, but this is just a little summary of how it got all mixed up and everything's all mixed up down there because of the colonization that was going on there and also different divides and different things like that. But that's what we know. We know T being a group that was up here, right? And remember we talked about how they swing all the way down to Ethiopia and they swing all the way down here, right? This group is actually, this is where they started at, but they came downwards and settled in those lower areas. I want to show you one more thing or a little more. I'm going to show you something real fast. I think it's on here. I want to make sure it's on this thing so I can show you it. Let me see. It might be up here. We'll go to the top. Let me just make sure. In fact, let me close some of these so it's not too confusing. Close that, and we'll come over here. Okay. So a little more on T, right? The T haplogroup and everything. We can find the ancient lines, right? M70 of T1A, the ancient lines. We're talking some ancient lines and everything that are considered, because when you think of Ashkenaz and everything, the reason why a lot of them, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of people are related, right? When we say related, because they mixed. A lot of groups mix. The place where we find T, the ancient T, is in Germany, right? Germany is where we find the ancient T group. We also know without a doubt that the T group was actually one of the groups that's also mixed as one of the things with the Slavic language. We already broke that down when we talked about the Slavs and everything, and how we talked about how the Slavs, long story short, That's actually who the Ashkenaz are. They're actually the Slavs. That's actually who they are. Long story short, and in connection with the Turks. The reason why that's important is to understand what happened around us, different things like that. What's the real story of the things around us and everything. So this is just a little bit on T. I'm going to talk about a certain point that I think I can talk about a few things here, but I'm going to talk about one certain point here. Though I can talk about certain things like how this lineage is basically seen among many lineages, but it's not the dominant lineage usually within lineages, but it's always a lineage that's that's in lineages, pretty much. Long story short, I guess, to make it simple. Let me see, where is that? Actually, down here. It's all the way down here. So a little breakdown of T. Just want to show you something. This one I didn't do when I did this video, when we broke down all the haplogroups. The reason why is because T is very small within the what they call Ashkenazi community. I actually don't know why a lot of times when they think of the what's the word I'm looking for? The Jewish haplogroup, they always talk about J or they talk about T. I don't know why they talk about T, because as you can see, T is only like 3% within the whole community. So it's very small, but you'll still see comments like what I showed you right here, right? When they had looked at the children of the Jews of Saint Domingue and Principe, they had said that the J and T groups were not detected there because they say J and T supposed to be the Ashkenazi or the Jewish group. That's why we're looking at it today. But it's not. It's actually one of those groups that, when looking at it carefully, is actually going to be the Vandals, or in a sense, a natural European group, haplogroup. Also right here is a little bit on that, talking about the European haplogroup right here. Now, truth is truth, but let's dig a little deeper, because what I had right here is a little breakdown at the bottom. I'm just going to show you a little breakdown here, just to break it down a little more. Okay, so here's a little bit more to it, right? Just looking at the T group, which they call Shem and everything. Obviously, it's under CF, right? We talked about CF before, the full breakdown of it. If you open up CF, you'll see what's underneath it. Here's basically a simple breakdown. CT splits into CF, right? To F. F breaks into GHIJK, to HIJK, to IJK, or IJKG, to IJK, to K, to LT, to T, right? And they're all underneath CF. All that's underneath CF. And the reason why that's important too is because I always mention that those groups are connected, right? Even if you look at that large haplogroup, HIJK, right? That whole group, GHIJK, involves GHIJK, right? All the groups under GHIJK, because they're connected. They're all connected. That's important to understand. Here's that group. We had looked at this one and we looked at that one, how the T has settled in these areas and everything. This is just a breakdown of that group. So I'm going to make sure I put this in the description if you want to see the full breakdown of how it splits, how it actually splits, and how we know that the CF is actually Japhetic and the DE is Shemitic and the BT is actually A and B. Those are going to be African haplogroups. Or not African, because sometimes they're outside of Africa. You're Hamitic African haplogroups, because sometimes Ham, right? Sometimes Ham is outside of Africa. For example, Nimrod. Nimrod was a Hamite. Nimrod never was in Africa. Nimrod was up there where Babylon was, right? So sometimes you'll have Hamites that won't be in Africa. There's an example right there. So this is just some breakdowns of everything of it. The reason why I wanted to break this down, because I think it's important to look at everything unbiasedly, without a bias, and really examine it carefully, examine the things carefully to see what we find. But from what we found, the T group is, long story short, just to make it simple, is going to be a European group. In short, they're going to be the group that became the Vandals. They're going to be a group that actually became the Vandals. And when they had settled in lower of the basically Africa and stuff like that, they started to be called, you know, barbarians and things like that. And this group is not going to be Israelites. This is not going to be an Israeli group, but this is going to be a European group, which, you know, in a sense is just, you know, truth. Now, I think I wanted to show this, but I think this I didn't show yet, as I think this is something important. I think I showed this. I showed this already. Yes. Just want to make sure. All right. So always put in some fruit or some fruit on the table so that you can see when we're going over these things that we're going over them fairly. This is just a short little live, I guess, to really express who is T and what is the T haplogroup. What exactly is the T haplogroup? So just a little information, as you see, it's spread out, right? There's a lot to it and everything. Let me find something on this note. There's actually one more thing I'm going to show you here. Right here, this is just one, just talking about the skeletons that were found in Germany and everything. We already talked about that and everything. There's actually one more that I'm going to see if I can find here. In fact, it might be on this note. Let me just see here if it's here, because I want to talk about one more piece here. Actually, this group, this is it. Well, this actually, no, not this group. This is for something else. I was thinking about this other connection because the Vandals also have J with them. I guess I might as well talk about this too. This is, I guess, the last piece. The Vandals also had a J with them. For example, when we talk about that one group that's called barbarians and everything, that's actually important to understand. When they came down there and settled down there, there was multiple different groups that settled down there.
Hello, everyone.
But this one, I might leave for another day. This just talks about another portion and whatnot. This just talks about another portion that was settled down there and everything, that had a J group, but in connecting them to who they are. You'll find that to be also fairly interesting. So right here, I'm not going to go over it right now and whatnot about this group and everything, just to show that this is here. Just talk about that in case that comes up, the question comes up when they talk about the J also being down there and everything. That's important to understand too. So we got that history. So remember, we just talk about the barbarians and everything, this group, and we could talk about the mixing of this other peoples amongst them, right? That's why it's important to understand the barbarians. When we say barbarians, we know when we say that is actually a mingled group, right? J's and T's and E's and different groups like that went down there. That's very important to understand. But are they Shemitic? No. But they do have a Shemitic language. Why? Because the Arabs. They pick up a Shemitic language because the Arabs ruled down there. That was something that also happened with the Seljuk Turks when they pick up that same language as well. So that's just something to keep in mind, that language doesn't change a haplotype. But when looking at haplo groups, we can find out who peoples are based on their origin. Who are they based on their origin and where they go? They're based on their migration and the peopling within those groups. So I just want to show you that T is, is not like really, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like we're getting deep into something that maybe someone don't know, but it's just something just to keep in mind, right? Ancient DNA tests have revealed that majority of early Neolithic farmers who colonized Europe belong to Y haplogroup G2A, with a minority of other haplogroups such as C1A2, E1B1B. Remember how we noted E1B1B came up there and brought H2 and T, right? Remember that. I'm going to leave off on this. So you can see right here, also in Europe, this is ancient times. They was also in Europe in ancient times, such as C1A2, E1B1B, H2, I2, J2, and T1A. In fact, it says at present, haplogroup T has only been identified in remains from the Leaner pottery culture in Germany. So it just let us know the T haplogroup is from the Vandals, right? That's the location where the Vandals came from, is that area where they was positioned right there in Germany. Also, we can find the female lineages there right next to the Rhine River. Right next to the Rhine River is where we find the female lineages as well, the origin of the lineages. So I just wanted to show you that. So you see that in Europe, right? The lineages in Europe, you can see they're E1, B1B. That's the one that came up there and brought forth H2 and T1. So one more time, we can read this little last ancient message right here, right? Just talk about 2016, tested the first ancient ones, blah, 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 or not. Talk about E1, B1B. It says these are to date the oldest known E1, B1B individuals. The same haplogroups show up in pre-pottery Neolithic B Jordan, accompanied by new haplogroups H2 and T. So remember how we just confirmed that H2 and T, those are going to be the ones in the Levant, but T, leaving it off on this, T only comes from this location. That's the only place where we find T. T comes from this location. That's the oldest place where we find haplogroup T. And it's actually what they call it right here, Linear pottery culture. That's where we find T. You can look right here. Everywhere where you see this yellow line right here, that's actually, let me make sure this, I'm going to say this right. Yes. Everywhere where you see a yellow line, that's where you're going to see that T. I'm going to show you their migration. Here's where T moved. T was here. T was down here. And the area where you see Rome and stuff like that, T was over here and T was over here. So T has some movement, obviously over here as well. T is also in this area. So T, 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 T in ancient time. That's we're talking, this is supposed to 5,000, 4,000 years ago. So T is all in the north. T is all in the north. And then T also came down into the area of Ethiopia. That's not the lineage. That's not of the what's the word I'm looking for? That's not that is not Solomon. That's very important to understand. That's not Solomon. Also, that lineage is connected to the Vandals. That's important to understand. That's connected to the Vandals. So T is going to be a group that also settled in Ethiopia, but its original origin is over here. That's the original origin where it came from. And then it also came down into the area where the Vandals are and is known to move with the Arabs, E1B1B. Those are going to be the Berber tribes. So long story short, T is going to be a European lineage. It is a lineage that stayed stationed in the north for a while, but it also made movements into Africa. But it is a Japhetic lineage. Some T haplogroups have dark skin. Some J haplogroups have dark skin. Some R haplogroups have dark skin. Dark skin is something, pigmentation is not a haplogroup, but it is a thing that is found usually in certain climates, right? So just keep that in mind. T, we went over it. Who were the Berbers that were with the Arabs? It was, long story short, the Vandals, haplogroup T was a group that was also found in the north. So long story short, I guess to bring this out, is T the haplogroup of the Jews? No. T is not the haplogroup of the Jews. Rather, it would be a European lineage. That would be a genetic fact. So with that, family, if you see anything, maybe I didn't put like this or this little thing, because I'm going to put these two in the description. So with that, haplogroup T, if you have any questions, let me know. Not really much to it, but that's a little bit to it. We also was going to go a little more into the Ethiopian information and everything. But just for the clarity on that, it's been dug into very extremely deep. There is only one Ark of the Covenant, and we know what it looks like detail by detail by the scriptures. And the one in Ethiopia, even if it was a copy, it's not the authentic one. It's not the original one. Also, we know based upon the movements of T, we know that T cannot be the lineage of the Israelites. That's without a doubt. So with that, family, be blessed, be beloved, and amen.